Welcome to Film Strip. These podcasts are spoiler-filled as we discuss the plots, characters, and themes of the films in review. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504(c)(2), Title 17.
Welcome to Double O Film Strip, where your host Jay, along with a guest, explore a single entry from each of the eras of James Bond. Today we're talking about The Spy Who Loved Me, starring, of course, Roger Moore as James Bond 007, Barbara Bach as Anya Amazov, KGB Agent XXX, Kurt Jurgens as Carl Stromberg, and Richard Kiel as the assassin Jaws. Directed by Lewis Gilbert, who also directed You Only Live Twice, and released in 1977, made over $185 million at the box office. Here to talk about the Roger Moore entry in our 00 film strip, my good friend Phil from Phil at the Movies. Phil, thanks so much for coming and joining me here on this special edition of Film Strip.
My pleasure, Jay. Thank you for having me on. This is one that is very near and dear to my heart. So looking forward to revisiting it with you.
Absolutely. Before we get started, though, tell folks a little bit about you. Tell folks about Phil at the Movies and your awesome show and all the good stuff you got going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thank you for having me on and for the plug. So every week I host a podcast as well as a YouTube portion called Phil at the Movies. Pretty much range from current movie reviews to open-ended discussions. You've been on the show recently, Jay. We did a fantastic ranking of the Friday the 13th series, which I can report is actually one of my better responding episodes of the Halloween season. So kudos to you on that. But in addition to movie reviews, a lot of movie discussions, movie news, reactions. We've done a couple of debate episodes over the course of the Halloween season. So again, it's, as I always say, it's for the love of movies. Full stop.
Absolutely. And it's a fantastic show. Always a lot of fun when you're solo or whether you have guests. And, I'm putting it in there now because I see them over your shoulder, even though we're not on video here. I'm always ready to come and talk to you about Joker Folie à Deux and to open that up for you, because I know it was a big disappointment for you when you saw it.
Yeah. We don't have enough time in the day, Jay. Time in the day.
In time.
Well, we'll see.
Yeah. So, but to our subject at hand, first off, let's talk about your background with James Bond. And I'm going to ask this question. I've asked this of all the guests: is who do you consider your James Bond? And what I mean by that is, who was the Bond when you grew up and kind of became aware of James Bond?
So my Bond growing up was Roger Moore. That was his movies were the ones that were always being played in my house. You sort of asked, what's my Bond story? I really discovered James Bond through my grandfather. And so this is very near and dear to my heart. He passed away recently. And so, just like even revisiting this, it was just bringing back a whole flood of just great memories. You remember, like, there would be like a Thanksgiving Day, marathon, and everybody was, getting the turkey ready. He and I would be sitting there on the couch and watching, any number of James Bond movies. But I specifically remember The Spy Who Loved Me, and even Dr. No, of course, that's with Connery. But it was just a very formative experience, and I mean, what better way to sort of be introduced to this world and into this character within through your grandfather, because he loved James Bond. He that was the one movie series that you could always count on him to be there, opening night kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's so great that you have the familiar connection too, because like I told on the Connery episode, and I guess I'll tell every time, I got introduced to James Bond because For Your Eyes Only was coming on as like the Sunday night movie of the week, and I was at an age where I thought, like, that looks cool, and my dad and I had planned to like go fishing on a weekend, and he saw me see the advertisement. He said, well, if you're going to see that, then you got to know where it starts. And he was a James Bond fan from back when he was in the Navy, because he saw Dr. No. And then he read a few of the books and had kept up with it. And he was like, yeah. And so we went fishing one day. I remember this distinctly. Then went and like rented Dr. No and went home and watched it that afternoon. And then Sunday, I saw For Your Eyes Only. And it took me a long time to kind of go like, wait, are these the same people? Like all that stuff.
What's the timeline?
Yeah, but I was hooked. And then like you mentioned, Ted Turner and TBS did as much for James Bond as they did for
Andy Griffith. It
I
was
mean, those
great. It was
those
wonderful.
marathons, yeah. And during the holidays, it was perfect because we would set the VCR up, tape a bunch of them, and then just let them play. Like we're sitting there playing cards, we're hanging out, whatever, and it just became a thing. And so I'm with you though. I grew up when I grew up and was really watching Bond. James Bond was Roger Moore, and the first Bond movie I saw in a theater was Octopussy. And
Oh,
I
okay.
saw several of them, in a row after that. So I had to catch. I've never seen any of the Connery ones in a theater. I've only seen them on television and or on TV screens. And they the screens thankfully have grown through the years. But I think the first one was like a 20-inch television. I
Oh
thought
yeah. Oh
the
no.
coolest thing ever.
Again, it stays with you. There's something about watching these kind of movies on like a 20-inch TV screen, and the
Uh,
quality is kind of grainy. I don't know. It's cool, man.
it is. But Roger Moore was my entry into Bond, even though I saw the Connery one first, because I felt like that seemed like something that was definitely from my parents' era. I'm like, okay, yeah, I get
Yeah.
And I knew who Sean Connery was because I had seen other Connery movies and stuff, and have really grown to just love him as a
Oh
performer
yeah.
throughout his career. But I didn't know him as Bond. I knew him as other things, and so it was neat to
Right.
kind of see him as Bond. But I didn't know Roger Moore as anything else except
Yeah.
James Bond. And I think I'd seen like one of the Cannonball Run movies where he has a cameo as basically James Bond, and which was a gag. And I'm like, okay, And so Roger Moore to me was always like what I used as the template for James Bond. And even when I read the books years later, the few of them I read, I just pictured Roger Moore because he
Bingo.
he
Yeah.
was this suave, cool, sophisticated, but sense of humor, but he could be tough. And
Oh
he
yeah.
was awesome.
Yeah. No, he was my grandfather's definitive Bond. He would drop everything if one of the Roger Moore movies came on. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and I had to catch the Moors like again through that marathon on TBS and stuff. So For Your Eyes Only was the first one I saw.
Mhm.
Octopussy, I saw View to a Kill. So I kind of saw his end run,
Yeah.
which is a pretty. I mean, For Your Eyes Only to me, and we'll talk about it later, is a really strong Bond entry, even though it's borrowing from lots of things. But as we talked about in this series, and we'll talk about when we get to our big roundtable, which is leading all this leading up to, is that there's really about 6 James Bond stories anyway, and even Fleming, recycled them, and it's just which parts you're going to use and stuff. And
Right. Right.
I never dinged more for that because I felt like he got handed sometimes some scripts that weren't as good as some of the previous stuff, and they asked him to do things like that he wasn't like Live and Let Die, and to some extent, Man with a Golden Gun feel like Connery movies that
They do.
that he's
Yeah.
in, and he does good in them. But this is the one where one Saltzman's no longer involved, and that really wasn't part of the problem. But
No.
they leaned in, they had a title from Fleming, but they used almost nothing else from the book except the Fanged Assassin, and they really modify that. And they went with Lewis Gilbert came in to direct it after they went through a lot of different people. And he went to the team of writers that were working on this with the Broccoli's at the time, and the uncredited Tom Mankiewicz, who's famous for a lot of things, but one of his best works was taking the epic that Mario Puzo wrote as a Superman movie and turning it
That's
into
right.
3 good movies.
That's
Really.
right. That's right.
So, and he gave it the punch in the dialogue because he had seen more in The Saint. And he knew what
Yeah.
kind of an actor he was.
Yeah.
And Lewis Gilbert and Roger Moore really worked out a shorthand of like, what do we want this to be? And
Mhm.
Roger Moore was adamant that like there needs to be an element of fun in this because these last two were so self-serious that it kind of like there's a little fun, but I want there to be some fun. And that's when you get the quips. And I think a lot of what people associate as the main tropes of James Bond's attitude really come from Roger Moore. They don't really come from Connery.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, Connery, of course, because he came first, everyone sort of holds him up as the gold standard or the template. But no, you're spot on because again, just that suave, sophisticated, but yet devilishly charming secret agent. I mean, that's all from Moore. I mean, even in parody films and other variations on the genre, there's definitely a hat tip to Roger Moore. And I mean, you can even see it even more of some of the current films with, Daniel Craig and even, Pierce Bronson to an extent. Like, I mean, Roger Moore, I think he deserves a hell of a lot of praise and credit because I mean, Connery had to find the footing and kind of make the character jump from the page to the screen, but I think Moore is probably the one that's had the. I mean, I may get in trouble for saying this, but he's had the probably the biggest impact, kind of long term. I mean, then everybody else. I mean, just because
Hmm.
of how we associate the character with, like, again, the gadgets and all of the
Hmm.
eccentric moments, and again, just that humor, which again, some people can say, oh, it gets a little too campy, but again, I think more kind of threads that needle where it's not tongue in cheek, but it's right on that line of just finding the soft spot, if you will.
I've used this analogy before, and I think it holds up. Roger Moore's James Bond is a very accessible Bond from a wide audience.
Right.
And it's very much like the two, no defense to Gary Sharon, the two eras of Van Halen. David Lee Roth is Sean Connery, and there's nothing like that. And it's
Right.
raw and it's brute, and there's some unreal stuff in there. There's also
It's the
some,
original. The
yeah,
original.
there's also some bad drumming by Alex Van Halen. I'm legally required to say that. But there's that. But then there's when Sammy Hagar got involved. And that's when Van Halen became hit makers. They had hits, but they didn't have hits
Right.
the way that Sammy put it. And Sammy Hagar and Roger Moore knew what the formula was, understood the assignment, and
Yeah.
made it very accessible to a wide audience because
You're right.
Connery's stuff worked in an era, and it very much is and some of more stuff is this way too, but Connery stuff very much lives in a time that doesn't exist anymore. And it was romanticized in a lot of ways by Americans because one of our most beloved presidents was a huge fan of it
Right.
and died, JFK and all
Yep.
that. And so it kind of galvanized a lot of things about that series, and he came along, and I always say Connery got handed four amazing movies in a row to start his career with. Doctor No's a very fun, accessible story. From Russia with Love is an incredible movie that's in the archives. Preston and I reviewed that a few years ago, and it's a great talk about that. Then Goldfinger and Thunderball are two of the best 1-2 punches you get from Bond, in my opinion. And even You
I'd
Only
agree.
Live Twice is a really good movie.
That's a classic. Yeah.
So I
I
mean,
mean,
Connery had just these gold standard lexicons of movies, and then he walked. We
yeah.
had the Lazenby entry, which really lives in the Connery era. If you look on my letterbox page, I rank those as one thing because they kind of live together. Because then
Yeah.
Diamonds Forever comes after, and it's not the greatest, land, and we're not going to talk about Never Say Never Again. But
No.
yeah, but
Never.
yeah, never. But I mean that era of Bond is a different template. And when they wanted to get out of that, they slow transitioned it rather than making all the other Bonds. I felt like got a hard turn into a new era. Pierce Brosnan got a hard turn, and Timothy Dalton gets kind of a hard turn, and Daniel Craig certainly gets the
Yep.
big reboot.
The biggest one. Yeah.
Yeah. They really just reset. That was as James Bond begins. It's very Batman Begins.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's right.
two of his films have very much to do with Batman. Well,
Yeah.
today, but we could talk about that a long time. But I mean, really, Moore had the unenviable task of we've already had one person try to follow Connery, and it didn't exactly work.
No.
Yeah, I know. On Her Majesty's Secret Service has its fans now.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, and for good reason, but it didn't work, and they moved away from it pretty quickly. And then they realized like Connery doesn't want to do this anymore, and he's not really it anymore. So now we got to launch this new guy, and they really gave him two Connery movies to start with. So I've always felt like, and I think you're agreeing with me, that Spy Who Loved Me is where Roger Moore really took the reins on the character.
This is where they found his mojo. This was where he understood the character. He wasn't doing not that he necessarily was, but a quasi Connery impression. Like he's his version of Bond. I mean, just as Michael Keaton was his version, Val Kilmer, like every actor has to find their groove. They can't just be doing a impersonation or an impression, as kind as it may be. It's boring. Like, and not that his first couple rounds are bad, but I think you hit the nail on the head. They feel Sean Connery-esque, and it's like if you're gonna do a Sean Connery Bond, just bring in the real deal.
Exactly, yeah, and I believe very much in the theory of like decades and the way they transition. They don't start at the zeros,
Right.
necessarily. Like they bleed over into like the third or fourth year before they really give way to the next culture. Like what we talk about the 1980s, we're really talking about 1984 to 1989,
Bingo.
in a lot of
Bingo.
ways. And now the
Oh yeah.
90s were a hard turn for a lot of things because technology pushed
Oh
us in a
yeah.
place that we didn't, really, but if you could even argue 1991 or
It's still
transitional
the
years,
80s. Yeah.
it's still the 80s, and a lot of things have the 80s aesthetic. But for Bond, Connery technically lasted from the 60s into the 70s because Diamonds Forever is 71, but that feels like a 1960s movie.
It does.
Yeah, it very much does. And in a lot of ways, Live and Let Die feels like a 1970s movie. It's 2 years later, it's 73, but it still feels very late 60s. It hasn't quite grabbed the 70s, vibe yet. And Man with the Golden Gun was just not a story that felt worthy of Bond in a lot of ways because it was so like mano a mano. It was kind of weird. There was no globetrotting to it.
Yeah, it's I mean not to go on like a side tangent about it, but it's such a drop off in a lot of ways from what came before. And again, it's not like it's a bad film. It's just you said it perfectly. It's kind of a step down from James Bond. Like,
Yeah.
again, when you see a Bond film, you want to see a globe-trotting adventure. You want to have, this gadget. Like there are certain boxes you must check. And
Yeah.
that one, I mean, I'm guessing, to put it in the, modern, terms, they took some swings with that film, and clearly they didn't work, and thus you get the, I don't know, the course correction or the, finding the right sauce with this film. I mean, again, this comes out in what 1977,
Yeah.
and it is, yeah, even though it's near the end of the decade, it is
Mhm.
like firmly like this is a definitive Bond film of the decade. This puts its stamp for the time, for Moore's take on the character, and I mean it's not a reboot. I mean, again, those weren't the words that you would
Mhm.
use then, but it does kind of feel like today you would say, all right, they're rebooting it. They're trying something new, and I mean clearly it worked.
I think we all know that they passed on Steven Spielberg to direct this. He really wanted to do one, and they
Yeah,
thought he's only had one hit. But he's still a Bond fan to this day. But I credit him with the tone of this movie, and really the tone of a lot of movies in the mid to late 70s, because Jaws was
hmm
such a turning point from like the French Connection or something,
right.
like because like Live and Let Die feels like it lives in that same world as
Yeah,
as French Connection,
yeah,
and it's kind of gritty, and it's in New
yeah,
York and all
yeah.
that stuff.
Very, yeah. Death
Yeah,
Wish almost.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, Death Wish. Yeah, very much that. And then Man with the Golden Gun, very personal thing, and it's kind of a waste of a great villain actor in Christopher Lee. But
Yeah,
it's fine. The
that's fine.
climax of that's better than most of the setup of it, I would argue. But this movie lives in a place where now like things are bright. We can have fun. It can be cool now, and it's on the heels of the biggest movie of the 20th century, Star Wars, which
Yeah.
is going to influence James Bond, as we'll talk about.
Oh
But
yeah.
it comes out at the right moment, and they took 3 years to get it right. And they spent a lot of time with it. Now, some of that was, the Saltzman breakup and the ever never ending McClory lawsuits, and stuff, and having to figure like, okay, we can't do Blofeld, we can't do Spectre anymore. And Lewis Gilbert was the one that came up with the idea of, well, what if we don't make it about like nation states at war with each other anymore too? What if we because he kind of foresaw what a lot of people did, that this Cold War thing isn't going to last. They're never going to really go at each other, even though the 80s would have taught us otherwise. But we knew at that point, like mutually assured, like we're not going to do this. So how do we twist that a little bit? And they came up with a really neat plot for it. And I'm going to do a cursory plot summary. It's not the usual
Yeah.
film strip plot summary. It's definitely not the humorous one that Ron writes most of the time for us. But just to let people know, and for some reason you don't know Spy Who Loved Me, pause this now. Please go watch it. It's on,
Yes.
as we're recording this, they're all on Prime, but you can find these
Yeah.
elsewhere. Watch it, and then we'll come back into it. So British and Soviet nuclear submarines mysteriously vanish. And so James Bond is tasked with, hey, go figure out what's happening up. And he teams up kind of unwittingly with an alluring KGB agent, Anya Amosov. Amosova, played by Barbara Bach. He discovers the mastermind behind this is an enigmatic shipping magnate, billionaire Carl Stromberg. Imagine that, a billionaire with ulterior motives. And Stromberg plans to trigger a nuclear war to establish his new underwater civilization. Okay. And then Bond and Anya race against time to stop the sinister plot. They face off against the towering henchman Jaws, who has steel teeth and can cut through cables and kill people and all this stuff. They globetrot across Sardinia and a little bit of Malta, and ultimately wind up in Nassau. And find the underwater base, and they even team up with a U.S. submarine captain to break everybody out. They get into Stromberg's world. They find themselves caught in this great game of cat and mouse where there's a lot of, burdening love, espionage, high stakes adventure, and ultimately, of course, good prevails because evil can't in these movies, as we know. And we'll get into the deep of it, but the setup of this and the cold open of Bond movies is always a great start. And I love the idea of these British and Soviet missile subs just getting like swallowed by something. They're just it's sucked in by this magnet. And part of this goes back to, again, my memories of Bond are really tied with memories with my father. Big Navy guy, again, submarine movies. I've seen them all, and seen them with him. And so this was an immediate hook for me. It was like, oh, we got submarines and James Bond. I'm in, and I love that as a setup for this. Because you don't know what's happening.
No, it's a great way of setting the stage with it. It felt like some of the previous films, it's almost like everything was getting spelled out beforehand. And so then, like, I mean, not that it spoils the movie, but like, usually by this point, you figure, okay, we know where we're going within the first 10 to 15 minutes. And you don't know that at all in this film. I mean, again, to go from that opening with the subs vanishing, which I mean, I remember the first time I saw it, I was like, boy, this is really awesome. Like it's because
incredible model work. Yeah.
Oh yeah, like I said, but people would say, oh, it's dated today, but like again, you figure for the time, and I still think it holds up myself. But like, I mean, what a great way to like suck you in, no pun intended. And then of course to then transition to the ski chalet. I mean, like,
yes,
like if you want to put a marker on a like peak Roger Moore Bond moment, I don't think it gets much better than James Bond, having an intimate moment up on the snowy slopes. I think,
yeah,
it's such a Bond exchange, and again, the double entendres, again, only Roger Moore could get away with this dialogue. Like you could never imagine Connery doing this kind of foreplay, if you will. Like
no.
Roger Moore knew how to work the serious angle with the comedic angle, and it's all right here. I mean, again, just I think it's like let me expand your vocabulary or something.
Yes,
it's just like I love it. It revisiting it the other day, I was like, God, this is a really good way to start the movie.
It's awesome. They're in this chalet. It's supposed to be Austria. I think it's in Canada actually, but either way, they're up in this, and he gets the call. He's like, oh, I gotta go. So he puts on this bright yellow ski suit, and I'm like, okay. And at this point, I've become aware enough of like Winter Olympics that I'm obsessed with like people that can ski because I've never skied. I didn't live in a place that had enough snow to pull that off. So it was, I'm always amazed by that. And when he comes out, of course, the girl betrays him and it's almost like he knows it. And that's the thing about Moore is that he plays it like, I know you're calling him, so just go ahead and give him a call. And so here come, would-be assassins, because there's always somebody trying to kill James Bond. And I love that now that has become such shorthand in these movies that it's like, yeah, we're just going to accept it. And he gets in this ski chase with these, and he's got a gun in one of the ski, poles, of course. So he shoots the main guy, and he's having this great chase. And when he comes off of that cliff, that stunt guy nearly died because the friggin' ski pole got caught in the parachute, and he had to kick it loose as they're shooting it. And I'm going, this guy jumped off a friggin' mountain to throw that Union Jack parachute up, and I'm like, that is an amazing stunt.
It's funny, like rewatching it. it takes longer than you think it would for
Hmm.
the parachute to
It's because
fully
it's scary.
open.
Yeah.
It's like what's going on? Like, is he gonna pull it out or something? And of course, he does, but it's just sort of, eerily funny what's going on behind the scenes.
And the fact that it works out, and of course that thing kicks,
Oh, it's
and
so
and
awesome.
and you get into the thing that James Bond movies had become known for at that point, that opening title sequence.
Bingo.
Having that Bender sequence and that song. And you really got to talk about those two things together, because
Yep.
the thing about the opening sequences is they tell you the story you're about to see
Right.
and what the
Right.
real thing's about. Like, you don't know yet. And so it's all this underwater theme. You've got the girls and the
Yep.
guns and all this stuff. And then you've got friggin' Carly Simon just dropping it and this was a change to bring in Marvin Hamlish as the composer. There's like this show tunes aspect to Nobody Does It Better that makes it one of the most unique Bond songs.
I, I will go as far to say I think it is. I mean, first of all, it's my favorite Bond song. I think this
That's
is just
nice.
it's a great one, and I would even argue it might even be the best because I mean, I know some people have their favorites, but there's just there is something about this song, the way Carly Simon performs it, like you forever associate it with James Bond. It's just again, you could be driving down the street, it plays on the radio, and immediately like you can't help but think of Roger Moore,
Yeah.
pulling out the ski pole or something. Like it's just I don't know. I think the song is immaculate,
Well,
absolutely immaculate.
and she sings the hell out of it too,
She
man.
does. She
And
does.
just a great set of pipes and one of our best. But and you've got you got great composer behind it again, and great
Oh yeah.
songwriters that put this together. And that's the thing about Bond songs, is that a lot of times they're kind of slow jams. They're ballads and
Yeah.
stuff. They're not all of them, but a lot of them are. And everybody always thinks like, oh, that's such a contrast. I'm like, no, Bond really is. If you wanted to have a song that introduced the suave, kind of fun Bond, you couldn't have picked a better moment to do it,
Yeah.
and a better sequence to do it with too, because
Oh,
man,
it's so
it looks
cool.
tremendous. Yeah,
No, again, with the way the gun and then you got the girls. I mean,
all the
I,
swim and
yeah,
everything.
oh yeah, it's easily one of my favorite opening sequences. It just again, you pair that with the music, and I think also coming off of sort of the adrenaline rush of the ski chase. I mean, like you're hooked into this movie
Oh yeah.
right from the very beginning.
Exactly, exactly. And it launches us through, into the rest of the stuff. But I love that they throw us into this and we don't really know what's happening. And
Right.
that's the fun part, is because, like you say, sometimes they do these things and immediately, like, well, that's the bad guy, and now Bond's just got to catch. So the audience is in front of Bond, which can
Right.
be fun, but it's more fun when you get to go along the way with him and watch him be a detective for a minute. You
Right.
know,
Right.
he doesn't know the answer, and you're trying to figure it out too. And then they throw us, I mean, the big case file is Stromberg's plan is kind of wild to think about. Like, I don't know that it works. It's not entirely thought out well, but I'm going to have missiles from these subs launch on New York and Moscow, which is going to trigger World War III and wipe out all that. But that's okay, because I've got like hench people, and I've got this whole like society ready to build Atlantis under, we've got this, undersea kingdom ready to go. And I'm like, well, this is the ravings of a madman, but it's also exactly what I want in just a Bond villain. And we'll talk about the villain aspect in a minute, but just in terms of like what is going to happen here and how Bond figures it out and gets to it. I don't know. I really dug it, and I dug the fact that it wasn't overly complicated.
It's refreshing, first off. Second, this is not the tired formula that had been utilized at this point of it's the Soviets. Like it was those definitely feel dated when you rewatch some of the older films because again, I mean, you know, knock on wood, we're not in another Cold War. But
True.
like I don't it wears itself thin after a couple movies. This, I mean, would sort of become the formula going forward, where you have crazy billionaire or, scientist type who's going to do some diabolical scheme that, again, no, it doesn't really make sense. I mean, who knows? I mean, it's
Hmm.
definitely, it's out there, but like I think that's what kind of makes it work so well, is it is so larger than life. Okay, he's going to build an undersea kingdom. Like, I mean, I think that's the ravings of a madman. Like,
Yeah.
again, we're going to fire missiles, but like I don't it's very Bond.
It
And
is. It's Thunderball in a lot of ways. It's
yep,
very similar to that.
that's
It's like I'm gonna have this middle person that manipulates these others,
yep.
and why try to fight them all? And this was Blofeld's thing. Is like why try to go to war with both countries when you can just have them destroy themselves?
Right,
Have the East and
right.
the West whack themselves, and then you can take over. Which is, I mean, that it's the
No.
ravings of a madman, but it's also not the worst way to play the game of Risk.
No,
So,
that's
I
right.
mean,
That's a good point.
it really is. But I love that's the simplicity of it, and part of how he figures it out. And this is the big twist for this movie is there are a couple of girls that the ski girl, and then there's an
Yep.
Egyptian girl. We don't know anything about them. They're going to center the Bond girl and also make it his counterpart and his adversary.
Yeah.
And it's a stroke of genius when the way they introduce Anya is the Russians call their spy, and you think it's the dude with the
Yep.
girl, and she's
Yep.
like, "You got to get out of the way. I got to take this call," and it's
Yep.
her.
Yep. No, the script is so immaculate. Like everything builds to the next scene. Like
Yeah.
there's not an ounce of fat on this story. It
Mm-mm.
is perfectly layered to get us to the next point. We know just what we need to know in the given moment. And like you said, we're going on this journey with Bond, which is kind of a nice change of pace at this
Hmm.
point in the series because like I said, yeah, everything has generally been spelled out in the first 10 minutes. And it's like, yeah, that's fun, but I would much rather go on, a kind of a mystery of sorts. And this one has all of the trappings. I mean, again, we can, certainly get into it with, like the car and, how that, transforms
Yeah, oh
and
yeah.
whatnot. But like, again, this is such a classic adventure film. Like it really does
Hmm.
it. I was thinking about when I was rewatching it, it really does feel like Indiana Jones before there was Indiana Jones. There is
Yeah.
that vibe that sort of runs through it, kind of a Raiders of the Lost Ark uh feel to it that I mean you can definitely see obviously, I mean George Lucas
Mhm.
has admitted it that Indiana Jones was, his own inspiration off of
The
James.
American Bond.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's just sort of funny to see kind of the almost the through line for
Hmm.
where things were going. And it again, it's poppy, it's
Hmm.
pulpy, it's very much what we would consider today to be a straightforward action film, but yet it pulls its punches when it needs to. Like again, the whole setup with Anya, like she's his lover, but she's also gonna kill him. Like
Hmm.
it's immaculate. It's absolutely immaculate.
It's a great twist on a thing they had done before with Tatiana in From
Yep.
Russia with Love. But the
Yep.
difference was Tatiana had a controller and Rosa Klebb. She was like one of those red sparrows, all of that stuff. And so it was a different vibe. Whereas this person has her own agency.
Right.
She makes her own decisions. And throughout the thing, like she calls Q Major Boothroyd. Like she knows who he is. Like
Yep.
she knows the stuff. Just like Bond knows all the inside stuff on her people, she knows how the car works. She stole the plans for it, 2 years ago. Like, I love that about her. And I love how Barbara Bach plays it. I mean, it's a pretty bad accent, let's not lie, but because she's from New York.
I know.
But it's what in 1977
It
everybody
works.
thought the Russian sounded like. It
It
was
works.
Natasha, Boris and Natasha.
That's
But it's funny because it's played for the right kind of laughs and
yeah.
also the way they handle the Russian situation here. And this is Lewis Gilbert, who showed a Bond film. He showed You Only Live Twice to a bunch of Russian dignitaries or something once at something, and they said that's awesome. We can never play it in our country because it's too anti-country. They won't let it go. And he said, well. And so he went to the Broccolis and said, "What if we just make them kind of like not entirely neutral, but just sort of like side players in this? Like, what if they're sort of the innocent bystanders and getting played in this by this, billionaire guy?" And part of it will be sort of how this girl works and stuff. And I thought that was a great stroke with it. And I love how even up until the end, you don't know, is she going to kill him? Is she going to screw him? Probably both. You know?
And that's the thing. Like, obviously, like James is never probably gonna be any real danger. Like, I mean, this
No.
is like, this is again classic staples of a 1970s movie. But like, part of the fun of this movie is that ride. Like, what
Mhm.
is she going to do? And again, their chemistry in the film is pitch perfect. Like, it's
Yeah.
like obviously there's a number of Bond girls that you would certainly put in a top 10 if you will, but I mean I'd be hard pressed not to put her near the very top of the list just because of the way she's more than your typical Bond girl, I guess is what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
I think you
I,
couple that with the chemistry
Mhm.
with more, I mean it's a match made in heaven.
I feel like there are shades in this character's interpretation and the way that she's played here and the way that it's written that don't come around again until we get to Casino Royale and Vesper Lynd and the way that Eva Green works.
Yeah,
We can get into that on the roundtable maybe, but I kind of feel like when I was watching this again, it had never occurred to me, but I thought there's some of that this is the proto of that here. You can almost see it. And they'll do this with Bond several times, giving somebody that can hang alongside of him, and in the next movie they do it. Holly Goodhead and Moonraker's right up there with it, in a lot of ways. But I like the mysterious aspect of her, and that we never
yeah,
really we know she's on the Russian side, but for once their side and quote our side, the Western side with the British here, are in cahoots with each other because it's both of our nuclear missile submarines that are missing. That's a problem. And
right.
we got to fix this.
The,
And
the
yeah,
enemy of my enemy is my
my
friend.
friend, exactly.
Yeah,
Yes, we're having
yeah.
that. So, and that's a good segue into our villain here, Stromberg. We've talked about him a good bit. Kurt Jurgens, who I will forever know again. I think it's a great thing to have a submarine thief, and one of his famous films is The Enemy Below, which is a great submarine movie. Just a great actor. Only a few years before his death, but you know sometimes Bond villains have to be real active, and
Mhm.
sometimes they can just sit in the chair and just be menacing.
Right.
And he's like friggin' Count Dracula in this, man. Like he is so spooky. There's something about it.
Again, not to pick on the other films before this, but the Bond villains had more or less felt like cardboard cutouts. It's like
Yeah.
stick in so and so. Like, I mean, again, even like in the previous film, like Christopher Lee is wonderful, but he's wasted. Like,
Yeah.
how do you put Christopher Lee in a Bond film and don't utilize
He's
his
just stuck on
full?
an island.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's just again, you're gonna
Mhm.
bring something like that, and you gotta give him some meat to to play with. But um, it, this felt like, all right, we're actually gonna create a character that has some agency and purpose. It's not just the, you know, guy sitting with a cat or mustache twirling. Like there was, I mean, I think partly because again, we're not going in the usual, you know, crazy Russian or
Yeah.
it's just a or an ex-general or something. It's this megalomaniac who is literally driven by his own delusions of grandeur.
Yeah.
And again, I think just sort of his part of what makes a good villain is what is the villain's goal, what is their plan, and this
Mhm.
is, I mean, we can put aside all of like the like, all right, is it real, could this really happen or not, but like the scopes that he has. This is like end of the world type. Like this is like, all right. He's going for broke. Like like,
Yeah.
this
He's
guy.
wanting to restart the whole
He is
thing.
not playing. He is coming. He has
Yeah.
come. He is come, and he is taking names. But yeah, I think this was a nice change of pace. Whereas the villains before this just sort of felt like stock villains without any real personality.
Yeah, well, I mean, they were either all tied to Spectre in some
Right.
ways, which was a great
Which is
thing,
fine.
but had gotten it
It was
gotten
stale.
old. Or the last two, like you say, they were criminals
Yeah.
that you didn't really understand. Like Yaphet Kotto gives a hell of a performance in Live and Let Die, but in the end, he's a friggin' heroin dealer. Like that seems kind of low for James Bond to have to do. Like
Yeah,
that's
James. Yeah.
something Popeye Doyle should deal with. You
That's
know,
right. That's right. No,
you know.
not
And
James Bond.
then Man with the Golden Gun is just like a grudge. It's like, well, I'm actually the better shot. But no, and so also that gun's garbage, and the Walther PPK is a real handgun, which we'll get to in a minute. But I love that Stromberg is, again, he becomes the archetype for a lot of Bond villains going
Again.
forward. I mean, even through the Brosnan era, and
Oh
I think
yeah.
even into the Craig era, there's just this central figure who's playing all sides for his own
Menacing.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and it works because he has menacing presence. That's Kurt Jurgens really gives a presence, and again in a performance where he doesn't have to do a lot. He's just sort of sitting there, but he's good.
Again, a lot of times, I mean, this is, an old cliche, but a lot of acting is reacting. And
Mm.
I mean, this guy was an incredible actor in his own right. But again, a lot of what he is just doing is putting out evil vibes.
Yeah.
It's just, again, he walks into a room. It's like, all right, you know who the antagonist is here. This is all right.
Yeah.
This guy is not to be trifled with.
No, yeah, and everybody's borrowing a little bit from Donald Pleasance and
Oh God,
and all these the people that have played that character.
Blofeld, yeah.
But Pleasance really is Doug
He is
Blofeld.
he is
Yeah.
Blofeld.
Yeah, and you have it, but I love like the character traits they give him. He's got webbed hands and webbed feet, and you only see it in like little glimpses. But one of his hench ladies is like, "Don't shake his hands,"
Right.
and I'm like, that feels like Doctor No again, which I
Yeah.
love because there's just something simple about Doctor No. I'm going to screw up the space program, Okay, I mean, yeah, that works.
Again, those little details which you don't necessarily think of in the moment, but afterwards it's like, yeah, that's part of a great villain. Like, you give them
Yeah.
some distinguishing scar or some little defect, and it's again part of their larger personality.
Yeah, and of course, like every good villain, he's got to have hench people.
Oh
So
yeah, and
so
we
he's got Naomi, the beautiful helicopter pilot, who'll just get murdered. So we don't think about her much. But Jaws is the one everybody remembers. Richard Keel, all 7 feet of him with those friggin' teeth, and I remember when I saw this because Jaws was a very impressionable movie on me as a young person. It's still one of my very favorite, films of all time, for a lot of reasons. So anything associated with Jaws, I would just consume. And I remember when I heard about this character, I thought, "What is this?" And my dad said, "Oh, you'll love it. This guy's got teeth. He can bite through anything." And I was like, "Is he a shark?" I didn't. And then I saw it, and I was like, "That is the scariest looking thing in the world." Like I equate it with how scared I got watching Superman 3 when they turned the sister into the robot at the end of that movie.
Oh yeah,
Which
that's
is
right.
one of the scariest friggin' comic book things ever, by the way. And and the way that he plays it, where he's this huge thing. It's like watching Kevin Nash roll around on people as a wrestler, but he basically just bites you to kill you, with those teeth, and he can just bite through anything. It's such a personal, killing machine. It's wild.
He's, I mean, he's a henchman, but I mean, you can honestly classify him as a villain in his own right because he has become so identified with this series. Like, again, you just show a picture of him or you show a picture of the teeth. 9 out of 10 people are going to know who you're talking about, even if they've never seen the film. It's sort of like Donald Pleasant's version of Blofeld. Like it has just become this personification of an evil mastermind, or in this case a good henchman. Like
Hmm.
it's so iconic, and the stuff that happens. I mean, like the scene with the tiger shark. Like, I mean, come on, like
Hmm.
that was perfect. Like,
Oh yeah, they're trying to kill him off, and then
yeah,
they decide this guy's testing too well, so let's have him kill the shark. I'm like, well, that's what an awesome way then he just swims away.
yeah, he gets away. He gets away.
I'm like, most of the time the hench people don't get away in these movies, and
No,
the fact that he does,
makes him
is
that much more
it
legendary.
does, and it's neat too to watch him and Moore go at each other because Roger Moore's kind of a tall guy. He's
Yeah.
6'2". He's one of the taller Bonds. And he looks athletic, but he doesn't look overpowering. But he looks like he can handle himself. And when he punches him in the face and nearly breaks his hand, it's like that's great. Like that's great comedy, but it's also great tension.
It was great to give Bond a real physical threat. Not that
Yeah.
there hadn't been before. I don't want to paint it with such a broad brush, but this, I remember watching this the first time as a kid, like thinking like is James Bond gonna be okay? Like it's like Batman going up against Bane or something.
Yeah,
Like it's just
yeah.
very like the big brute, and again you punch him and it's like doesn't feel a thing. Like okay, this guy means business here.
Yeah, so what does he have to do? He has to do what James Bond does, which is outsmart him, and he basically gets a magnet and drops him in the pool. And I'm like, but that's what I loved about Moore, because like
He was
Connery's Bond would just try to bull you, over. Moore's Bond is like, well, I can't, beat you up, so I'm just going to outsmart you.
yeah,
And,
very
and
resourceful.
yeah, and to make a sports analogy of it, it's the way Mike Tyson fought people was to blow through them, in his heyday. The way
Right.
Lennox Lewis fought you was to jab you to hell and just wear you out
Wear
over
you down.
15 rounds because he was smart. He's a smart guy, and Roger Moore plays very much the same way. He's like, I can blow through you, but I don't have to. I'm gonna outsmart you and quip the whole time doing it, which is great.
That's the thing. I mean, again, I go back to what I said earlier. Moore was able to do it in a way that nobody else had done it at that point. Nobody does it better,
Yeah,
as the song
it really
goes.
fits.
Yeah, like it just, again, it would be hard to see anybody, even in today's context, to be like
Mhm.
punching a guy while also, delivering a clever one-liner. I mean, it
Yeah.
just,
It's
again,
what you think of when you think of Bond, though.
you
Is
do
all that.
again.
Yeah, that's why I always say like everything that you think of as a trope in Jaws isn't in Jaws. It's in Jaws 2 and 3.
That's a
A-
great point.
and everything that you think of as a trope in Friday the 13th isn't in Friday the 13th 1 and 2. It's really in 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. Like those
That
things
is
come
such a
along as you go.
down the line. That's
Yeah,
right. No,
yeah. It's through any series, it evolves and goes down the line, and that's what makes it fun. Is that you've got this great villain who, again, doesn't have to be physically imposing to be villainous because he's got unlimited power.
Right.
And all these people are following him. So I would have loved to have been in like the Stromberg like cult meetings or whatever because they've got their own uniforms and stuff. Like just how he won all these people over because it's hard to get like 5 people to agree with you, much less hundreds.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they are like loyal to the death
Oh no,
followers.
this is a cult right to the very
Yeah,
end. I,
totally is. And I'm like, I can see the water cult, the Atlantis cult or whatever it was. I love that. And I love that. And I put him in the villain category because he's just this reoccurring character. This idea of the Russian General Gogol, who will just pop up
yeah,
from time to time, who's sort of the Russian M,
yeah,
and
that's a good point.
I love that character and that it's when the Bond series started doing the thing that we all would do, throughout the next 10 years of history, is realizing that like there's a lot more that we know about each other than we're willing to admit, and it's time to start admitting that we've learned a lot about each other, and what we've learned is we don't really want to kill each other. you know,
Bingo.
we're better off to how can we make this work?
How can we survive? How can we coexist peacefully in some
Yeah.
form? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I love that character in here because he's just such a neat presence. He'll pop up again and again, And I knew him, of course, from For Your Eyes Only because he's in it, and I'm like, oh yeah. And so seeing the origin of it here is like, oh, this is neat. This is where this starts, and it's cool. So the other thing they tamed down in this, Phil, is you talk about no wasted space. There's not a lot of gadgets in this. There's really like 2.
No,
And-
yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny you should say that because for some reason, it's been a while since I had seen this film. For some reason, I remember there being more gadgets, and maybe it's just like when you're watching it as a kid, everything is larger than life, and so you sort of blend it all together. But no, this is very skinny on the gadgets, whereas you often hear the criticism, I guess some people have of the Moore era, where it's like basically everything was a gadget, like the flower was a gadget, or the cuff, like everything was basically a bomb or a gun or something. But like this film is it's there to serve the story. It's not overdone, and that was something which I had completely forgotten about, but also really appreciated because everything in here serves a purpose, whether it's again the ski pole or the jet ski or the Lotus becoming a submarine. Like again,
Yeah.
everything has its purpose to the story. It's not there to be, well, I mean, they weren't selling toys necessarily at the time, but
Mhm.
like, it was not oh well, we got to have something cool happen. Like everything serves the purpose, and
Yeah.
that again is another reason why I think this film just works so well. Is again, even the gadgets are justified.
Yeah, and the big one is the Lotus Esprit, which at the time was new. No one knew. One just pulled up out in front of the studios one day, some executive driving it, and one of the Broccoli team was like, "What is that?" And if you know anything about it, like I know that car because my brother's a big car guy, older than me, and he played all the driving simulation computer games growing up. And one
Sure.
he played, I don't remember, it was the Need for Speed, one of those, but the Lotus Esprit was in it. And he said, "Oh, that's the Bond car." And he said, "But the thing you got to know about it is it was like the accessible Italian sports car because it's cheaper than the Ferrari,
Sure.
and it had parts kind of like a GM that you could find and you could work on it yourself. You didn't have to have you didn't need to be an engineer to
Right.
work the car, and it had this design that was so different, and I mean, again, they parodied it in the Cannonball Run movie because of course Moore's driving a Rolls and he's also got one of these in it,
Yep.
and it's got the wing doors and all this, and I love how they outfit the thing where it's got all the gadgets that all the Bond cars have. It's got the smoke out the back, it's got guns, it's got a missile, all that stuff. But the coolest thing is that it becomes a freaking submarine, and that is awesome. That we kind of get a replay a little bit on the Thunderball underwater sequences, but this
Yeah.
time James Bond's got a sub. And what I love is like the Jaws 3 sub and the Jaws 4 sub come out to play in this too. And then of course they get wrecked. And I don't know. I love the whole underwater like part of this. The water theme in this movie's thick. So we got to give James something where he can play in the water, but not look like he's trying to work on his tan. Like it's all functional, and it's so space age looking. And I don't know, I just think it's so cool,
I wanted this car as a
right?
kid, and like I mean, after watching it, I was like, yeah, I kind of want this car right now. Like it's
Yeah.
again, I mean, now you wouldn't think twice about it. If something like this happened in a Bond movie, but you have to think at the time, this is the 10th film in the
Mm.
series. To have this happen, I mean, I can't imagine how audiences probably reacted to this at the time. Like again,
Oh
you
yeah.
made the point earlier about this sort of coming on the heels of Star Wars and how that impacted the industry and
Hmm.
storytelling. And this really does feel like it's the next step, if you will, for the Bond folks and kind of let's see how far we can push the envelope here. Like
Hmm.
all right, we need James to be underwater. What can we do that's cool? Oh, bingo. Let's turn the car into a submarine. Like, come
Yeah.
on, like just chef's kiss.
Like, yeah, it's great. And then the jet ski that gets assembled in the bag, like at the
Yeah.
time, that wasn't something people knew what that was. Like,
Yeah,
what
I
did that
know.
look like? And the fact that you can do that, it's a
Yep.
boat that you just drive by yourself, like,
Yep.
and that whole thing. But I love that the Q scene though is when he's going over the car with him, is there's all this other stuff going on. And it's happening on a submarine. And that's the funny part of this to me is knowing a little bit of submarine history is when they actually go to the US sub, like, and they're in the control area, that's a little more realistic of, 'cause it's very cramped. Like there's no
Sure,
wasted
yeah.
space on a sub at all. But this sub has all this room for like computers to fall out of the wall, and there's all this test stuff because Q's lab, of course, it just goes with him
Oh
everywhere.
yeah, traveling lab.
Yeah, but I love, but it's got the plate going across the table to behead the guy, and you've got the firing this, that, and the other. But I love those things, but they're not anything James is going to play with. But that
No,
started this tradition of him walking through and seeing all this other random stuff,
right.
and it becoming kind of a gag, and then them letting kind of Desmond Llewellyn do his thing, and then go, let me give you the 4 hour debrief on how this works.
Right.
That he's not interested in at all.
No, again, like that's another area where more excels. Again, just the
Mhm.
uh it's I wouldn't say like he's playing an airhead because again, his Bond is very intelligent, but just sort of that like disengaged, almost
He's very
playboy.
erudite,
Yeah, exact,
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
like okay, like again, I mean, yeah, I've certainly mentioned this on my own show again, but like you think of the Christopher Nolan Batman films, and
Hmm.
Nolan has said like James Bond is all over a lot of his films.
Yeah.
To say nothing of Tenet, which
Inception. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But like again, those moments of like the lab at work. I mean, again, whether you're watching the future Bond films
Hmm.
or again the Dark Knight trilogy, it's so fun to see where these references and nods all begin. And
Yeah.
it again it's so crazy that like the impact and reach that this film has had, not just on its own series and legacy, but I mean films across many genres. I mean, again, you see it even in some of the Indiana Jones films.
Oh, totally. And well, you mentioned the Nolan Batman films, and I think a lot about the way we get to see both Morgan Freeman and Michael Caine's characters putting together
The
stuff.
gadgets, yeah.
Yeah, for Bruce Wayne Batman, and it's very similar to the way that Q
Q
builds,
operates,
yeah, builds
yeah.
stuff, but not sometimes with the humor. Not, I mean, like when the face plate smashes in Batman Begins, it's very Q. Like,
Right, oh
well,
yeah.
what order 500 of them. Well,
Right.
we'll have replacements.
Well, that's fair, yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
get some brand new ones. And like no, we're gonna get new ones next week. And I love that there's like this little failure
The
point of it
banter,
because
yeah.
with any good experiment, half of it is doesn't work.
Oh
You
yeah,
just
it's trial and error, trial and
yeah,
error.
and that's the fun part of it. And yeah, but again, this movie is very much not leaning on the gadget part. We're gonna have one big gadget, and it's gonna be one that lasts for a while. When he drives up on the beach is a great scene. You got the big guy just dropping the bottle of wine, going like, "What am I drinking?" And all the people are, "What is this?"
The
You
hell's
know,
going on?
yeah, and they've had to do that because they've sprung a leak, of course, after their underwater battle. Only to lead them up again to get back to the sub and to do the more investigative stuff, and that's part of the too is that the travel log in this one, it's not a lot of different places, but it's some really exotic places like Cairo and Luxor, Egypt. Are well photographed and look incredible. My wife just got back from like Malta and Sardinia and
Oh
all that
wow.
stuff, so we're watching this and she's going like that still looks the same. She's like,
Oh
matter of fact,
wow.
I was standing there like 2 weeks ago. She said that looks exactly like that. Now she said they don't change things over there, and I said, yeah,
That's
I can see why. It's gorgeous. Like, why would you
yeah.
touch it? Yeah.
If it's not broke, don't fix it. Yeah.
Exactly, and then again, Nassau had been a place that the Broccoli's had built a studio because a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
Bond stuff happened down there, and the water is gorgeous.
It
I've been
hot.
to the
Yeah.
Bahamas, yeah,
Oh
it's
yeah.
beautifully clear, and I love that they I like to say that they kept that in this. I love the travel log in this Bond, I really do.
No, as we mentioned at the top, it's a great return to form because with James Bond, you want to see him globetrotting. You want to see him going to all of these exotic locations, and even if it's just there for a quick scene, like again, you mentioned like just the shot of them coming up onto the beach, like again, it's always refreshing to see Bond out in the elements, so to speak,
Yeah.
out, kind of out of the, either like a laboratory or like a dungeon or something, like just to see him out in
Hmm.
these different locales. Again, it also gives the movie such a grander feel and vibe to it that, again, like I feel like I'm picking on some of the other films before this, but like a lot of them felt almost claustrophobic in a way, or I mean, granted, all these films were to some extent, but like some of them before this felt like they were just shot on a soundstage and they
Yeah,
just
you could
changed a
feel
little
it.
window dressing. Like this felt
Hmm.
like, all right, they're actually there on location,
Hmm.
and it gives it such a legitimacy. Like I am always in favor whenever a movie can go to a location, even if it's, doubling for some place. Like it just
Hmm.
gives it that much more authenticity versus a soundstage, or I mean, even today with like, the digital technologies,
Yeah,
the
the
volume.
expanse
Yeah,
and all
like
that.
I
Yeah.
just like go take me to a city. I don't need to see it
Mhm.
projected onto a screen.
Yeah, no, I love that too, and it makes it gives it this grounded piece, but it also brings home this idea of that Bond can be anywhere when he needs to be. You know, that MI6 can go anywhere. They've got places. He's got a college friend that's a sheik in Egypt, so that's his in. You know,
Bingo.
to
Yep.
to get the information he needs, and then that's how he hooks up with Anya, and then they tool around Sardinia and Malta, and then they end up in it's supposed to be, I think it's supposed to be somewhere else off the coast, but they end up shooting it in Nassau. But they're figuring out where everything is because it's supposed to be out in the middle of the ocean because that's the idea that it's like minimum safe distance from the radiation, right? That's going to rain down, and that's the thing is like the big finale of this is basically a raid on the thing. So they've befriended this U.S. submarine, the USS Wayne, and they've got this kind of commander who's going along with it, because we've got great relations with MI6, obviously, right? And he convinces this guy's got orders like, hey, we got to go blow this thing out of the water, like we can't do this. So, but first they're investigating the big tanker that has stolen the subs, and they get sucked into it like a tractor beam or something, which I was like, well, I don't know how that works, but I like it. But
It's cool.
I love that their thing is like, okay, the dashing Americans, of course, along with James Bond, are going to lead a raid inside of this with these Russian and British troops. And there's a lot of gunfights in Bond movies, but this is one of the biggest ones I can remember, man. There's a lot of shooting and killing going on the side of this sea lab.
Oh no, this one is epic. I mean, like this was not your just pull a few guns out and call it a day. Like, I mean, this was a full scale like war, basically.
Yeah, they have a war inside of that tanker and blow it all to hell, because the two subs are sent out like drones to go and shoot the missiles off. They figured this out, and the control rod is there. And I love how they're working out like, okay, we can't blow through the control room door because there's this big metal plate. So let's disarm the nuclear part of the warhead and then use that to blow the door open.
And again, like, yeah, again, this is such a credit to Moore, but like, he does it without breaking a sweat. Like, it's just it's very calm, cool.
Yeah, well, first time for everything.
That's it. It's just, again, the way the lines just roll off. Like, again, it would be hard to see another actor doing it with such authenticity. Like, again, somebody else could be making it into just like a parody or a joke, but he just brings such a warmth and a likability to it. Like, I mean, it just, I mean, like you said, your first time, it's just like,
well, and it's the submarine captain who says, hey, I think we can reprogram these things. And so him and James Bond reprogram the missiles to they've launched, but to shoot each other's like, the dead subs, right?
Right.
So nobody knows the difference. I mean, of course, this huge explosion in the ocean. We'll explain that some way,
right?
But I mean,
no aftermath effect.
That's a hell of a stock footage of like Bikini Atoll or whatever.
Oh
they
yeah,
going there, by the way. But whatever. You buy it because then you realize that like Stromberg is like screwed at this point. He's like, well, I'm done. So I'm just gonna steal the girl and go back to Atlantis now. And wait for you to come after me because I've got a whole army there too while this tanker's sinking. And James Bond convinces a U.S. submarine captain to not launch on this thing for 1 hour so he can go save the girl because of course he can.
Yeah, it's James Bond.
Yeah, and he attacks it with a friggin' jet ski. That is awesome. Like only James Bond.
Again, it just like some people today would be like, oh, that it's so cringe, or it's like, come on, like guys. This is
James Bond.
It's James Bond. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. Just the explanation for it is it's James Bond.
Yeah,
because he's James Bond.
Because James Bond can go into a place like that armed with nothing but
bingo, and walk out victorious
with a pistol.
Blow everything to sky.
eight rounds on a good day.
Oh yeah, on a good day.
And this is one thing that I really liked about this because again, as a guy who pays attention to these kind of things and having owned a Walther before and know how they work, they don't jam. And this gun jams on him.
Yeah.
Like he has to unjam it. And I'm like, that's a wild thing because when they make a big deal in Dr. No about like, you got to dump that Beretta because it jams. And I had a Beretta 22 once. And yes, it does that. That Walther PPK doesn't do that because it's got there's a lot of high grain in that bullet. Like it's the gas is throwing that thing out.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now the American version of it will jam. I've shot that one too. But the Walther does not jam. And the fact that he jams on him after he shoots Stromberg, it's kind of wild. But we got to talk about how he shoots Stromberg because it's a pretty vicious death. He's got the gun under the table,
Yep.
which James Bond knows, of course, because he knows. And he gets
It's
out of the
James
way and he puts his Walther through that thing while the guy's sitting there. And he shoots him in some pretty harsh places, man. Like, that's a rough go.
Today you wouldn't think twice about it, but it is sort of, it's ballsy how
Yeah.
they went there. Again, this is 1977, and obviously, like, I mean, this kind of stuff happens, happened in movies, but it is sort of remarkable that, not that it's like over the top and like, blood and guts going everywhere, but like you figure prior to this, it was almost kind of like, I think the term is like clean violence in a James Bond movie. Like this was like it kind of felt like, all right, we're gonna really push the envelope here. We're gonna give James a little some teeth here, and we're gonna, again, make an impact, so to speak.
Well, I mean, in Doctor No, there's a great scene where Sean Connery guns this dude down, like it's like a big deal. But he usually dispatches the main villain in some like really over the top way, like he throws him in a pile of mud that's sinking,
Right? Yeah, or
he
he
drowns
falls off
in
the
nuclear
balcony
water.
or something. Yeah,
He throws him out of a plane.
Yeah.
There's he wrecks his boat into a thing. He shoots him with a spear gun. There's all kinds of ways he gets rid, or the girl does. He has lots of ways he dispatches with people, right? And the fact that the way he dispatches with this dude is he just friggin' shoots him. And like he doesn't just shoot him through the pole, that wounds him. He stands up, takes aim at him, and puts two more just to make sure. And I'm
just
like,
make sure he's dead. Yeah.
that's like hardcore. I'm like, everybody talks about like, oh, Daniel Craig is so hardcore, and he is as James
Oh
Bond.
yeah, no doubt.
Roger Moore just gunned this fool
He
down.
just gunned this guy, not once, not twice, but three.
He shot him like 7 or 8
yeah,
times.
he
Like,
took him down. Like, come on. I mean,
yeah, he really but I like that in the end, for everything that's been so dispassionate about this, Bond has made this personal with this dude and has decided like this is how you are going.
You're
to go
going down this way,
Yeah.
and I don't care what. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's one of those times where, you sort of get a peek into the not necessarily maybe the humanity, that's the wrong word, but almost the psyche of Bond in a way. Like, I mean, now it's almost, I feel, a little overkill. Like they've almost gone too far with the psychoanalysis of the character. But like this, again, I think is sort of a nice way of having your cake and eating it too, where, you could still have him be the cool, detached, international man of mystery, but yet little moments like that, they're really great character insights, and you kind of see like, all right, this is what this is personal for Bond. Like he's willing, to go this far.
Oh yeah.
And that's again, that's sort of that's a refreshing lens into the character. And again, you do feel like it's, in some ways, it's more really putting his stamp on the character.
He is, and he and Anya get away as the sub destroys they fire the torpedoes, they sink Atlantis and all that stuff, and of course they're in the little escape pod, and he's like, oh, it's good champagne, of course, and she's like, am I going to shoot him?
Is it going to happen? Yeah,
and yeah, she kind of grins, and it's like, you knew that's how that was going to go down, right?
Oh yeah,
and right as the big ship's coming to rescue him, of course, and I love that they do this with this part of the song, because at this point you like kick into the chorus. And in the middle of this thing, they've written a show tunes breakdown. It's like, did we just step on Broadway for a second here with this? And you're like, no. And then here comes Carly Simon and that big, brass and all that stuff behind it. And I'm like, nah, that's exactly the satisfying way this should end. Like it's good.
It's very. This movie has such a cinematic quality to it, and again, it's not that the other films didn't, because they certainly all have their moments, but like it just crescendos, man. Like by the end, I mean, the other day, like, I mean, I felt like the need to start applauding. Like it's like, holy, it's like, come on, this is you couldn't end it any other way. Nobody does it better.
Yeah, and this movie put Bond back on the trajectory.
Yeah,
because it was a mass hit. $185 million in 1977 is a huge hit on a $13 million budget. That's a huge hit. It's everybody loves it. Critics love it again. They're like they brought the fun back to it. It was a great return, and they give us the great sting at the end of like James Bond, the end of The Spy Who Loved Me. James Bond will return in For Your Eyes Only.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing the first time I saw that, I was like, I don't think that's right, is it? And I was like, no, they did Moonraker. And of course, you find out years later, oh yeah, this little movie called Star Wars happens. And
Yeah, I know.
yeah, we might need to jump in front of that.
Yeah. Let's go catch that trade.
That Moonraker's its own thing or whatever. Okay, and they do eventually get around to For Your Eyes Only. But I always love when they leave us on that moment, right? They're like, oh, okay, there's going to be another adventure.
It's a nice tease.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, like we take it as sort of part and parcel today, but like it's cool to see it back in that context. Because again, you imagine this is 1977. There's no internet, there's no fan clubs or social media groups or anything. So like you go see the movie, unless you're reading the trades or some of these entertainment magazines, like I mean that like how would you know if there's gonna be another
because
James
you see it
Bond?
in the newspaper at the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like
And this is a run 7 in a row that they do a Bond movie every 2 years. So this is when movies stayed in theaters for a long time. So it had a long theatrical run, right? There's no home video at this point. There's really not TV. There's a little bit of that, but not like it is. So it's a long theatrical run. They go into production the next year. They get the next one ready to go, and boom, we come out with Moonraker, and then boom, we come out with For Your Eyes Only, Octopussy, View to a Kill, Living Daylights, License to Kill. They switch Bonds in this, and they still don't take a break. That's a 2-year for 7 straight Bonds, 14
really
years.
amazing.
It's a hell of a production run for any studio to do.
Like I mean, we sort of laugh about it today because of the whole Marvel run back in its heyday. But like I mean, James Bond was doing it before it was cool.
Yeah. Before there was an MCU kids, there was a JB.
There was James Bond,
and they were cranking those babies out up until they hit a point where they had to hit a reset on it.
Oh yeah,
and that's a story for another day. But still, for this put Roger Moore in that swing up, and Moonraker has been parodied a lot and stuff, but that movie it would cost a lot of money, but it made a lot of money too.
No, it did. Again, Bond was cool again. And it's because of this film.
Yeah. And then they came out with For Your Eyes Only, which for me is like a big, big deal. And then Octopussy and View to a Kill have their ups and downs, but they're still quality entries. And they let Roger walk off, into the sunset, as it were, because he had gotten old enough that he couldn't really, pull it off anymore. But as all these guys will at some point. But yeah, for your taste though, with Roger Moore Bond, real quick, how would you rate the Roger Moore Bonds? If I go on your Letterboxd page and I see the Roger Moore Bond series, what would you put them in at?
Let's see. That's a good question.
So you've got the movies you got are Live and Let Die, Man with the Golden Gun, Spy Who Loved Me, Moonraker, For Your Eyes Only, Octopussy, and A View to a Kill.
So definitely number one is going to be The Spy Who Loved Me.
All right.
That has to be number one. Number two, I gotta go. I gotta go with For Your Eyes Only. I think that's easily number two. Number three would be Moonraker. I think that I feel like that one sometimes gets overlooked. Where and maybe because like Star Wars, people just sort of like view it as a cash in, but I don't know. I find that one to be really strong. I also have a soft spot for Octopussy. I know that one sort of gets pilloried from time to time. Him running around in a clown costume, but I don't know. That was another one that I have a lot of memories of watching with my grandfather, and so that one again, it's definitely very very personal. And then I'd have to think on where I would place the other ones, but I mean definitely top three would be The Spy Who Loved Me, For Your Eyes Only, and Moonraker. Those would be the top three, I think, for Roger Moore. But like even some of the lesser ones, like he's never the problem.
No.
And I know sometimes people are quick to say, "Oh, he's too silly or it's campy." No, like he is giving 110% in every version. Again, there's a reason why he's a fan favorite. He's the audience's Bond. Like he is always firing on all cylinders. And it's that suave, cool, charming, deftly funny spy.
Feels the same thing I say. Val Kilmer's not the problem with Batman Forever.
Thank you.
Yeah,
There-
it's he's really not,
No.
and that's the same thing about Roger Moore. For me, the more For Your Eyes Only is that's probably obvious. Is my more. I put this one as second though because I feel like it's very strong. I have Octopussy third. I love that movie.
It's a good one. No,
I really do like it. It's dark too.
It is dark. I
Yeah,
know.
there's some twists. I actually have View to a Kill fourth. I know people love to hate on that movie, but
That also gets unfairly.
but it's
knocked.
the same thing as Spy Who Loved Me, the megalomaniacal billionaire. It's just the fact that he's kind of old. Like
I think that's probably why people just sort of think, oh, he's trying to retire.
it's a top 3 theme song and maybe my favorite Tease Tease. But I love the Duran Duran song. I like Moonraker next, and then I put Live and Let Die and Man with the Golden Gun in the the 6 and 7 spots. And it's, again, they're not that they're bad. I feel like they are transitional movies, like we've talked about. We're moving from the Connery era. We're still kind of doing that. But when we hit Spy Who Loved Me, we've got 5 movies that are really Roger Moore's.
He found his groove.
Yeah, they really did, and they made it work. And so, I think we both are pretty. We've said it. We're both really high on this movie. Spy Who Loved Me is a strong entry in a Bond catalog, and it was so much fun to revisit. Man, I forgot how much fun this. I texted you. I was like, I forgot how much fun this movie was.
It is. I was thinking about it after it was over. I almost wish, and it probably won't go this way, but I almost wish the next iteration, because there's going to be another iteration for Bond.
Oh yeah,
I almost wish they would take a lesson from this error. I'm not saying, you can't replicate it 100% because you don't have Roger Moore. They are, in that sense, of their time, and what worked, in 1977 is not going to work in circa, 2025 or something. But
yeah.
I think just kind of get away from that almost like dour and psychoanalysis angle and just sort of get back to I'll just say
fun with
the
it.
fun. Have fun
Yeah.
with Bond. I mean, it's James Bond, guys. Like this is not supposed to be, a dark, somber spy story. It's James Bond. Like, and I think sometimes the Craig films, which I do love. I think, those films a lot of them are great, really great. But I think sometimes they almost get a little too serious for their own good, and that's not James Bond. Like,
Well,
it's that balance.
Yeah, it's very much like eras of, some of the superhero characters like Batman or Superman.
Yep.
There's times when I want the Dark Knight,
Right.
but there's also times when I really just want Batman Forever. I just want to have some fun and just,
Yep.
I just want to kind of
movie.
I just want to get washed over in this wild Tim Burton fever dream. And just go with it.
Yeah. Just
And
go with it.
sometimes I just want to go to 1966 with shark repellent. Like there's just times.
That's right.
There's few times I want to go with Mr. Freeze, but there's a moment for that movie too. It has its
Sure.
place.
Now,
They all have their
bat
place.
nipples have their moments. Yes.
They have their yes. Everything has its place,
Yeah.
and I think Joel Schumacher he clearly had a vision. We can talk about that another day.
Oh, yeah, no,
Donahue.
I agree with that.
This has been fun to talk about with you though, and I'm really excited for when we get through the series. As we've talked about, we'll have the roundtable with all of you guys on that have done these Bond movies with me, and we'll just go through the whole thing together and talk about
That'll be fun.
favorite things of this, that, and the other, and kind of we'll do a little bit of like what we've done here and that we've done on the end of these shows is what do you want from the next Bond? Because I'd be curious to hear everybody at once.
Oh,
so
yeah.
we get into that. But before we close, Phil, please again tell folks how they can follow you and follow your excellent show, Phil at the Movies.
Well, Jay, thank you again for having me on. This was a really exciting conversation. I got to revisit a Bond film that I haven't seen for a couple of years now, and it was a great nostalgia trip. So I thank you for the invitation and for letting me relive some fun memories. Yes, again, you can follow my show every Friday, Phil at the Movies, all of the social media handles and notes. I'm sure Jay will put in the show notes here. But yeah, every Friday, movie discussions, movie reviews, and as I always say, it's for the love of movies. And Jay, look forward to having you back on the show. I'm sure in the not too distant future. I haven't forgotten about our discussion vis-a-vis Tenet. So
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
that is going to happen.
Yes, I'm always down to talk about Tenet, as film strip fans know. So, but
There
Phil,
we
thank
go.
the pleasure's been mine, my friend. This is a
Thank you.
blast, and I'm really glad we got to share some Roger Moore stories, and look forward to more of talking Bond in the future, but also other things as well. So, all of Phil's stuff will be linked again in the show notes, and of course, folks, here on this special edition of Film Strip that we're calling Double O Film Strip. We're in our third episode. We've done Connery, the Lazenby output now, and we've done Roger Moore. So it's time to get ready and go to the next iteration of Bond, which we know is Timothy Dalton. So that'll be coming up in the near future. You can find this show, of course, in the Film Strip feed. Film Strip Podcast, wherever you find your podcasts, you'll find us, and you can follow the show on social media at Film Strip Pod. That's where we put out all of our announcements about upcoming shows, and you'll get a lot of the stuff with the hosts, and we appreciate you listening. If you can, leave us a positive review. It always helps other people find the show, and let us know in the replies and stuff. What did you think of The Spy Who Loved Me? What do you think about Bond? All of that. We love interacting with the listeners. It's a lot of fun, as always. So until next time, thank you for listening to Double O Film Strip.
Thank you for listening to Film Strip. The Film Strip theme music is produced and performed by Frozen Lake 121. All content used or discussed in these podcast episodes is the property of the respective owners and used under the Fair Use Act, Section 504, C2, Title 17.